Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I'm Sally Jensen. The EU is trying to tighten up the sustainability of its supply chains, and Taiwan may not pass its standards. To learn more about this, we're joined today by Armin Ibitz. He's an associate professor of European Studies at the Wenzao Ursuline University. Armin, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Hello.
So let's take a look at the industry here in Taiwan, specifically the production of phones. Now, over half of the world's population owns one, but what goes into making one takes components from all over the world. How much of what goes into making a smartphone is made here in Taiwan?
Obviously, we all use our mobile phones on every day now, meanwhile, so which means the demand for mobile phones is huge, and Taiwan plays, of course, a key role into this in the production. As you all know, that Taiwan is one of the largest producers of components for mobile phones, so mainly OEM companies.
Could you quickly explain what OEM is? What do you mean by that?
Original equipment manufacturers, which means we see that actually large companies, large manufacturers, they somehow source out the production to companies inside their own country, but also globally. Taiwan plays a key role in just manufacturing the AI servers, artificial intelligence servers, for example, and mobile phones, cameras, many components actually what in devices we would see that they are products from another country. They are produced here in Taiwan. So we should not underestimate the role of Taiwan it plays inside this ecosystem of electronics and electronic component production.
Manufacturing chips, for example, uses a lot of energy and water. What kinds of environmental problems is this causing here?
Maybe we start from the economic side first. Of course, the contribution of this production of electronics here in Taiwan has been very beneficial for the Taiwanese economy and also for job growth and economic development in a large. However, it leaves some kind of the question like the environmental burden on it. And you just mentioned that energy, for example, the energy usage for production facilities is quite immense, and also the water intake. We saw that, for example, that the Taiwanese, the local producers of wafers, for example, they try to work on recycling methods and also try to cut down the energy usage. However, it's very, very difficult to achieve this. So on the long run, I think Taiwan is in a situation where it's producing actually electronic components for the global market, and somehow the environmental burden stays somewhere here. So we need to accept this and see this like this.
And what about its connection to the EU in this? Is it just a supplier of parts?
The largest part of Taiwan's export, for example, is electronics. This also goes for the European Union market. So, for example, it takes a huge part of all the Taiwanese exports with a destination to Europe. Yes, that's true. However, we also need to see it in a different way. So, which means Taiwanese companies need to react on the changes of the market from abroad. So it's a two-way direction. For example, the EU has set up several regulations which are trying to green the supply chain and the electronic sector itself in the past. And of course, this is also part of, it was taken up by local producers to follow and match these regulations and these requirements.
So now let's zoom out on some of these regulations that you're talking about. For example, the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, it's quite a mouthful, that the EU recently voted on. Can you explain what this is?
Yes, you're right, actually. This directive has just been adopted in the European Union, and also made some headlines within European Union countries because it places quite a burden on companies. However, the burden also, we need to see it like this, aims for something. And this aim is to green the production and also somehow make Europe transform into a sustainable economy. So you just mentioned this corporate sustainable development due diligence directive, which is really quite a name, yeah, is covering a lot of issues. So which means mainly it will try to provide incentives for companies to think about their business models from a very foundational basis. So what we see as given, for example, now may not continue in the future. What I mean with this is all the businesses, for example, large businesses in Europe, they are forced to reconsider their some kind of practices in not only environmental terms, but also human rights terms.
Is Taiwan falling foul of this directive?
Let's put it like this. It puts pressure on all of the involved partners. Yes, it's true. I would single out two main sectors which would be hit quite heavily from this directive, which is first the electronics sector, and the other sector is our fishing industry. And I think in the fishing industry, we already saw that Taiwan has been put on monitoring lists because of the human rights issues there. But it also affects the semiconductor industry in Taiwan. So I would not call it a foul play, but there is room, of course, to implement and to adjust the local situation here to match the requirements. There is actually a transition period for this directive. So which means it was just adopted recently in April by the Parliament, by the European Parliament. And now there's a transition period, so which means it goes effective actually, and the first requirements are due 2027. So which means there is some time to get adjusted to it. And as I mentioned before, it starts with large companies first. So which means we talk about companies who are employing over 5,000 people and also over a global turnover of 1.5 billion euros. So we start here, and slowly a year later, the conditions and the scope of this directive goes to another level, which means smaller companies will be affected.
Can you tell us how the semiconductor industry will be affected in this transition period?
Mainly, we need to understand that the semiconductor materials which are going into the production process in Taiwan, they are, of course, not mined here locally. They are all sourced from abroad. And we know that materials going into the production process, they come from many, many regions in the world. And several regions in the world really face issues on environmental terms and also on human rights terms. So the idea of this directive is to ensure that the suppliers upstream and also actually downstream business partners, they are following certain regulations. So which means in the case of Taiwanese semiconductor industry, it would mean materials sourced from abroad. Taiwanese companies would need to make sure and ensure that environment is protected, sustainable development efforts are made, and there is no, for example, violation of human rights issues on the supply chain of these materials. So it's quite a challenge to follow this. So which means in the next years, I would expect, or actually the next month, and several companies are working on this already now, we would expect that companies look very carefully about who are the suppliers, what practices they have in place, and then maybe identify some kind of issues which pop up, and also think about how to address these issues and how to prevent such issues on the long run.
Tech has one of the biggest carbon footprints of any industry, and this is growing. What is the EU now doing to tackle this?
There are several issues, actually. We need to understand that, for example, the tech industry, in the production process, a lot of energy is used. Electricity is used at different kind of forms, energy, mainly electricity. So which means if we could reduce fossil-based energy supplies in this industry, we would have gained a lot. But of course, we need to understand it like this. It's not only the production process itself, it goes already way beyond this and starts already in the mining processes. So if we want to grasp a complete picture of the ecological footprint of products, we would need to start to think about mining, refining, supplying the products, then the processes of the production, but also operating and using the products. And then it comes, of course, also the end of life situation. So we need to distinguish these different sections, actually.
Could you tell us a little bit about the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and how that might affect some Taiwanese companies?
It was actually designed along with the European Green Deal in 2019, and it came along with other measures as an instrument with the purpose and the aim to cover and to address carbon leakage. So for carbon leakage, we need to understand what is carbon leakage. Carbon leakage means if we outsource our production to other regions, to other countries, and they are using, for example, different production methods and energy, they have a different energy structure, which may be more fossil-based, then we understand that actually with our outsourcing of our production to other regions, we also somehow hand over the carbon emissions to those countries. So given that now different regions have different carbon intensities, so this CBAM actually tries to integrate and prevent that countries with mainly fossil-based energy structures can gain advantage, let's say it like this, can gain advantage because of the cheaper production. So the main idea is like we create a level playing field. And the CBAM is actually an instrument which would mean the importers of products into the European market would first make sure that they understand the carbon emissions of the product. And second, if those products come from a country which has no carbon price in place, that they have to buy some certificates, credits, carbon credits, we call it. This would also affect Taiwanese producers, yes, because the energy structure in Taiwan is still quite fossil-based, which means Taiwan would face some kind of a tariff or a carbon adjustment on the border when it's exporting products to the EU, yes. Just to give you one example, one of the largest producers of electronics here in Taiwan, TSMC, is, of course, very aware about CBAM, and they're preparing to avoid any kind of disadvantages for their business. So which means a switch from the energy structure, the energy source here in Taiwan, from coal and other fossil-based sources into wind, we could already see now, because TSMC was drawing up a contract with Ørsted to actually draw energy from the wind offshore park in Taiwan. So yes, I would say we can see that local producers are reacting on it.
Thank you so much for your insight, Armin. It's been great having you on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for watching Zoom In, Zoom Out. You can find more stories from TaiwanPlus News by going on our website and following our social media. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
We bring you stories from Taiwan every day of the week.
Our reporters travel the nation.
Exploring the issues that matter to you. News from here in Taiwan and around the world.
What's up, Taiwan? On TaiwanPlus.